Welcome to the Round Table Digitally. This is a small cooking series. We're going to show you about some really cool and fun recipes. So today we're going to teach you a little bit about one of our number one original menu items that we've had. It's called Lembas bread. I'm not going to show you how to make it though. We're going to introduce you to our cook, Paul. He would be on screen with me like a normal traditional cooking show, but because we're here social distancing with COVID-19, we're going to have to play it a little bit different than a classic cooking show. But what you can see below are the ingredients. I'm going to step out of the way, let Paul walk in, and we'll ask you questions as we go along.
Good evening, everyone, or good morning. So today we're going to be learning how to make Lembas bread. Lembas bread is a play on a traditional Canadian native Bannock bread. So what we got here, divided up into our bowls, we have all-purpose flour. We're doing about 3 cups worth of all-purpose flour here. We're doing about a cup and a half worth of warm water. We have a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. Over here we have sugar, just regular white castor sugar. And then in this bowl here, we're gonna have 3 different things. So on this side here, we have salt. This side here, we have baking powder. And over here, we have our cumin.
So cumin is it traditional for Canadian Bannock bread?
No, it is not. Actually, the sugar and the cumin is not traditional. Most of the time, Canadian native Bannock bread was done with animal fats and some flours. So obviously this came around when the settlers came in and realized what was going on. We're going to start off by mixing our dry ingredients together and our wet ingredients. Except for the sugar here, the sugar we're actually going to mix in with our wet ingredients. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to mix in our dry ingredients. So here we have the baking powder, cumin, and salt. We're going to be putting that into our flour mixture. You have to look at it as like a clean slate. So the fact that we're using sugar and cumin, which are 2 things that I want to bring forward in flavor profiles, that doesn't mean you have to do that. The salt and the baking powder are definitely one of the things that you're going to have to put into here. But I've also done this bread with caramelized onions.
Oh man!
With instead of the olive oil, I've used duck fat. And then you can also do things like roasted garlic, garlic powder, some herbs and spices. Basically whatever kind of way you want to take Bannock bread, it's sort of like an open platform.
I can smell the cumin.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to mix together our wet ingredients. So here we have our olive oil, our water, and our sugar. So the sugar we're going to put in with the olive oil, and the water we're going to put in there just like that. And so here what we're going to do is we're just going to give this a nice little mix around, because what we're trying to do right now is actually dissolve our sugar. All right, so now we've got our 2 base mixtures put together. Obviously this is very, very simple to do. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take our wet mixture here and we're going to put it right into our dry mix.
Hey.
And then from there, now we can start doing the actual bread process.
Oh yeah.
So this is a really easy way to go. You can get your kids to do this.
Gotta get your hands in there.
Gotta get your hands in there.
This is where the kids are gonna have fun. Get in there and get messy.
So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna mix everything together until it starts to come together a little bit more. Basically what we're trying to do is hydrate all the flour. So we're just gonna keep mixing it up. So now that we've sort of like hydrated everything together and you can see it sort of coming together, now we're gonna mix this traditionally like a traditional bread. So what we're gonna do is try to get as much of this flour and mixture as possible out of the bowl.
So you're kneading the bread right now. So what's the process in kneading the bread?
Basically what we're trying to do is create gluten and gliadin, which is the structures of the flour properties that hold bread together. So in traditional baking, we want to look at it from the perspective of good bakers knead little and rest a lot. So the more we knead it, what happens is the harder it becomes. So you can see right now it's very soft. It can pull apart very easily.
It looks like that tack that you use to put on walls.
Yeah, but what happens is, and you can see how lumpy it is too, right?
Oh yeah.
So what happens is the more we knead it, what happens is the smoother the dough becomes. So I'm just gonna take it out of the bowl here.
I was gonna say,
And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna work on our freshly cleaned surface. And so basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be kneading this dough here. And at any point in time, if you find that the dough starts to stick to the table, you can also add in a tiny bit of flour to your table to actually make it so it doesn't stick more. So how you would do that, even though mine's not sticking right now, you just take a pinch of flour and you just do a nice light dusting. You can do a little bit of a dusting on there, keep the flour on your hands, and then you can just keep going.
And so how long would you consider doing this for? Like for a good amount of time?
To be quite honest, like you want to knead for probably anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes. And how I'm doing my kneading here is a very specific way. You use your hand, and we're using the palm of our hand. So what I'm doing is I'm typically bringing the one end forward, and then with my palm, I move it forward and smear it out, and then turn around and do the exact same thing again. After I'm done kneading it, we're gonna do the good bakers kneading little and resting a lot. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this back into our bowl that we used.
Okay.
And we're gonna let the bread rest. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take our freshly rested dough and we're going to start our shaping process. So what I've done currently is we've had our oven preheating to 350 degrees. And here we're going to start off with getting our tray ready. So this is a good thing to get your tray set up before you start the dough, just so we can have this ready to go. So what I'm gonna do is I have another half cup of olive oil here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm only gonna use a tiny bit of it to go onto the base of our pan. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our pan is nicely oiled up during the middle of it.
I think it's safe to say that you know not everyone has an industrial pan that big, so you can use any smaller bits of pan. You can create multiple pans. Would you say that it's okay to have a smaller pan?
Yeah, you can use anything from a small baking sheet. You could use muffin tins if you really wanted to. I mean, if you really wanted to go the route, you could actually turn around and do the a pan frying method.
Oh, really?
So instead of doing a traditional thing in the oven, what I would do is put my olive oil inside of a nice skillet, and then I would, on a low heat, get my skillet heated up with a little bit of oil, and then put my bread inside of that, and then probably put a little bit more on top of that. And you could also shove the skillet into the oven to finish cooking.
Would you say that it's more that would be like a crispier bread kind of taste?
Absolutely. The more you're frying this bread, the more of a crispy outside you're going to get, which is absolutely lovely.
All right, what do we got here?
So this is our freshly rested dough. So we've rested this for about 15 minutes. And so now we can see at this point in time that it's relaxed quite a bit, so it doesn't recess as much, and it just sort of falls away. And this is a really good point for us to be at. So now what we're going to do is we're going to freshly flour our surface. For kneading out the dough, you're going to need a rolling pin and something to cut your pastry.
So that rolling pin looks a lot like something I'd have at home. It looks like a different type of rolling pin. If you don't have this pin, you can just use any old rolling pin that you have?
Yep. For rolling pin purpose, you can have these styles. You can have French style rolling pins, which they don't have the bevel in the middle. They're just straight flat rolling pins. You can have the ones with the sides, with the handles. And then if you're really destitute for a rolling pin, always can use a wine bottle.
I never thought of that, actually.
So if you ever need to make bread,
a wine bottle.
Drink wine.
Wow. Wine and bread. Okay, wow.
I mean, great combination, right?
That's actually really cool. I'm actually just going to try that just for the sake of.
Yeah. So,
of course, clean the wine bottle first.
I mean, I hope so.
So, a little bit of flour.
So what we're going to do is we're going to lightly flour our surface here to make sure that the bread itself doesn't stick.
Pretty simple.
We're also going to flour our rolling pin. So what you want to do is do a light dusting on your rolling pin, and with your floured hand, you can just do this.
Oh, I see. So it doesn't stick to the actual...
Yeah. After you've taken care of your surface and your rolling pin, now we're going to take our bread and we're going to put it onto our surface. You can dust it with a little bit more flour if you'd like. You obviously don't want to use too much flour during this process, because if you do, what could potentially happen is that you've over-floured your dough and it'll come out more chalky or whatever. So the whole entire idea is that we don't want it to stick to our surface, and we don't want it to stick to our rolling pin. So what we're going to do is you start off in the middle, and you're going to work towards the edge. And as you can see, is it pushes itself outward. You don't want to go right over top of your edge so much, but you want to work your way outward. So what we're doing is we're just slowly getting that shape together.
How much pressure are you putting on there? Just not much at all. You just almost...
Not much. I'm just basically kind of using the weight of my arms to encourage the dough to go that way.
Cool.
And obviously the more you've rested it, the less it's going to retract. So you might have to knead this quite a lot more, maybe a little bit less.
Is there a size? Like this kind of looks like a pizza right now. You could actually make a Lembas pizza with that.
You could do pretty much almost anything.
That's incredible. I never thought about a Lembas pizza.
You could also put this into a bread pan if you want and actually cooked it off like a loaf as well. It's just going to take a long time because the thicker it is, the more time it takes to bake. There is no waste in this. I'm going to show you the way that we like to do it. And then obviously we make sure that any of the leftover pieces will go to staff.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, this does not go to waste. Whenever the Lembas bread is made, I'm always sticking around because the little pieces at the end get made into little donut nuts that I end up eating.
Yeah. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start marking our bread. So first of all, I want to get my nice shaping done. So this is a pastry cutter or bench scraper, whatever you want to call it. This is typically used for taking care of doughs. It's also, because it's called a bench scraper, when you're done, you can basically just scrape your surface, get everything clean, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we have our offcuts here, and these I'm going to just put into the oven like this. You can obviously just put it back.
Maybe put a couple eyes on them, make little Lembas fish.
What I wouldn't do is rework your dough. Because if you take this dough and you put it back into a ball form and then roll it out, it makes your dough a lot more stiff. And you don't want a stiff dough, you want a nice light dough.
So I notice you're cutting them in like perfect quarters for now.
Yep, we can cut them into perfect quarters. I can do them into halves as well, and then we can go from there. For this, the sake of this video here, I'm just gonna do the 4 pieces.
Yep.
Obviously this is a lot of dough, and this is good for a good amount of people, and you'll see in the end exactly what it looks like. So what I'm gonna do is, just traditionally we score it, so you can rip off a piece or whatever.
Scoring is just, you're just putting an indent into the dough?
Yeah, you're
not cutting the dough?
No, you're not cutting it at all. You can see that it doesn't go through all the way onto the other side. It basically just creates a little indent in there that is just better for serving, so people can rip off pieces of the dough.
So now you're starting to see the serving portions.
Yeah.
And each serving portion is probably the equivalent to a bun with your soup or with your meal.
Yep. And so what we're going to do now is, now that we have our 4 nice pieces, and we're going to make sure that they're not sticking to the surface, this is when we're going to grab our baking tray again. And from here, we're going to start putting our pieces onto the baking tray. And I'll show you that in just 2 seconds as to what it looks like. Something very nice to do in the morning.
Oh, look at that.
Something very easy. So now we have our square shapes or rectangular shapes, whatever you prefer. We have a few pieces on the ends that we can just eat casually or whatever you want to do with them. And so now I'm going to take the rest of my olive oil here. So this olive oil here is basically going to get drizzled onto the top of the bread. And this fat here is going to help it cook a little bit more.
So the olive oil is what makes it vegan, because I've noticed that there's absolutely no dairy ingredients in this.
There is 0 dairy in here because we want to make sure that by doing this bread, you want to have a nice, beautiful vegan bread. Obviously there's a lot of breads that of this style that you're going to have different fats in. You could use butter, you could use animal fats, duck fat. Maybe if you want to even go for like bacon fat, you could try doing that. But I like the olive oil myself because it adds a peppery flavor profile, which adds to the spiciness of it. And then yet again, not using any dairy so that anybody can consume it is a fantastic way to go.
Now you've got it all oiled up.
We're going to do just a tiny seasoning of salt over top. You don't have to do this. We have everything ready to go. We're gonna take this, shove this into our preheated oven at 350 degrees, and we're going to be cooking this off for 8 minutes. And then we're gonna be rotating our pan to make sure that the other side cooks evenly. After we've rotated, put it in for another 8 to 10 minutes. Then we're going to let it cool down for about 5 minutes because you don't want that nice hot steamy dough, but you can still have it when it's hot.
If you want your own Lembas Bread Kit, we are creating these kits with all the actual stuff partitioned out into a nice ready-made kit for you. So you can watch this video and you can make the lembas bread along. We will also be listing the ingredients, so you'll have a chance to actually go and get your own ingredients if you don't want to get it from us because of distancing. We have a procedure in which we'll be able to give you the ingredients in a plastic bag on pickup or delivery. All the details will be on roundtablekingdom.com, and from there you can make your own lembas bread. And of course, you can have a drink with that on the side. You can put on Lord of the Rings in the background, get the kids involved. If you don't have kids, you can just make a nice date night. If you're doing it solo, that's fine too. It's just a fun thing to do on your own. Something to help us all while we are distant. Be safe, and thank you so much for watching.